And we're live. Hello, Tom Lavecchia here with the latest edition of the New Theory Podcast. We have a sponsor for today's podcast. Interesting. We're going to talk about books today, but one book I want to draw you into is Joseph Paris, Hairman of the Board. He'll be on soon. He's now 87. He was Frank Sinatra's hairdresser, good friend, and also did his toupees. The Board, Joe Paris recalls his years with Frank Sinatra from Joe Paris. Check it out. I'll put a link below so you could check out the book and buy the book. But we have an esteemed guest today, and I'm really interested to chat with Mark for many reasons. His name is Mark Gottlieb. He's with TMG. He's a vice president. He's a literary agent and does many other things. And first, let's jump in. Mark, welcome to the New Theory Podcast. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you for having me here. It's nice to be here. Great title, by the way.
Hairman of the Board.
That title alone is going to sell that book.
Oh, I agree. And Mark is a good man. I don't want to show the label because I don't want to get like demonetized or get sued by any other company. But I can say it, I guess, right? I got a beautiful Four Roses bourbon from Mark. Thank you for that.
Sure. And I don't work for Four Roses. I don't get anything from Four Roses. It's just a good. I like it. It's a good.
Just
bourbon.
a good bourbon. I love it, and I'm a big bourbon guy, so it's really appreciated.
Sure, of course.
So I want to jump in, and I first want to talk about, as a marketer, as a podcaster, literally 1,000 times I had somebody come to me and they say there's an expression, everybody has a book in them, right? Yes. I wrote a book, and we'll talk a bit about that. But with that said is, people have to be realistic. When do people really have a book in them, Mark?
I do believe strongly that, yes, everyone has a book in them. It's just when is the right time, when is the right time and place for that kind of book. Definitely you never want it written on your headstone, oh, he never got around to writing that book.
Yeah, good point.
But I think at least for authors of nonfiction, you need to have a big platform behind you. That's what publishers tend to want. They want the audience kind of baked in. And with fiction, the good news is it's just all about good quality writing, good storytelling, that sort of thing. So it's a little easier in one sense as a fiction author. You don't need to have built up that platform, but you got to put all your cards on the table because you got to sell it on a full manuscript. Nonfiction sells on proposal, though. A little easier to sell in that sense.
That's what I was going to say. So you brought a great point. So I get approached all the time. So I self-published my book, and I kind of created a virtual publishing house, and I got pitched a lot of stuff, and was really reluctant. But the first thing I say is, or ask is, how many followers you have? Do you have like kind of an ecosystem baked in to help move units? And I think I want to step back a little bit. And the reason why that's important is because publishing has changed over the years. And, it used to be you got like a big advance, and you got, did the tour, and you were on Stern, you did all this great stuff, and there was a lot of money in it. But with a lot of the money resources drying up, they can't take as much risk, so therefore they need your audience as a launch point. Can you talk a little bit about how kind of traditional publishing has changed over the years?
Well, you're right about all the things you said. I mean, there was a point in time in publishing where you had like a multi-city author tour or things like that. Now, I mean, the internet, it's a great way to reach people. It's a lot more time and cost effective than traveling and all that. So definitely the whole author tour thing has changed. I think the pandemic brought on a lot of that. There weren't really bookstore events and things like that. So definitely all of that has changed. But then, there's still a lot of magic to this stuff in the sense that there are books publishers buy where they think it's going to be a huge book, and then they pay a ton of money for it, and then it flops. Yeah. And then sometimes the opposite happens, something they think is going to be a relatively quiet publication, and then it surprises everyone out of nowhere. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with you know what? I have an interesting story. I have a lot of guests, so everybody has a really unique story. So I have an interesting story, let's say, right? And should I self-publish or should I reach out to a literary agent? Let's kind of go through that decision tree. Help us navigate through that initial kind of starting point.
I mean, I think a lot of it depends on what your goals are and everything. I mean, if you want a book that's really commercially viable, more often than not, you want to go the traditional route, because in self-publishing, there's a sea of books. It's really hard to stand out among all those books. the way they price these books, it's sort of a race to the bottom. It's like you think to yourself, how can McDonald's make money selling these like, you know,
$13 hamburgers?
Yeah, well, they sell a ton of them. That's the trick.
Correct.
So, whereas in publishing, it's sort of like we're selling the Kobe beef burgers.
Yeah.
So there's a bigger margin for profit.
Good point.
But with self-publishing, you know, so there's that. And then just there being a glut of material, very hard to stand out. And what I caution authors against sometimes in self-publishing is unless you can make a success of it, it's going to be really hard to sell the next book to a traditional publisher.
Interesting.
So they have to kind of make a strong track record of it in order to, if they want to pick up a publisher later on.
So my first book, X Factor Selling System, was a sales book. And I think I sold 1,500 units first one. And then the second one, I put more resources behind it and sold 2,500 the second version. Same book, but second version. I lost money on it. But I used it as a marketing tool to land bigger clients. So I made money on that. We'll talk about some scams and pitfalls in self-publishing. Okay, so you brought up a good point, because what I do is when people come to me, I decided to get out of the publishing game, or not really get involved with it, but in the marketing of books. I'll do like bestseller campaigns. I'll get to that in a second why. But with that said, is what I say is if you want to go the self-publishing route, this has to move units. Otherwise, a guy like Mark is not going to want to talk to you. Not that you're a bad guy, but you already shot your shot. And if it's not commercially viable, it's going to hurt you. So you really need to move, a lot of units. What's true about that and what's not true about that?
Well, I'm speaking in generalities, but I'll give an instance of I had a client who approached me. His name's Taylor Bayouth.
Okay.
He told me, he said, "Why'd you choose to work with me? I've been rejected by 70 or 80 different agents." I said, "Because in your cover letter, in your query letter, you were telling everyone you had self-published this book. And you go and you look at the book and it had like 12 reviews." And I said, "But that's no fault of your own." I said, "You could be the best writer, the best storyteller. It's just hard to stand out in that space."
Correct.
He said, "Then why'd you take me on?" I said, "It's a good story. You're a good writer. I think we could sell this." The title of the book is How to Steal the Mona Lisa and 6 Other World Famous Treasures.
Oh, wow.
It's all about high-stakes thievery. How do you airlift Rodin's The Thinker out of the Louvre? How do you steal the Mona Lisa? Stuff like that.
Well, that's like the Gardner Museum robbery that happened in Boston, that they still didn't find those pieces.
Yeah, they're famous art heists like this that he drew upon. But I told him, I said, "You had to promise me one thing." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "Let's not speak about the fact that the book had self-published. Back then, you could remove stuff from online. Now, I think Amazon archives it. So now it's like getting a tattoo removed, but you still have a scar.
And there's a lot of secondary people that have it in random places. Yeah. And when they go out of print, they just mark them up, which makes it more attractive sometimes too, which is crazy.
Yeah, but what we did in his case was I said, let's just not remove mention of it and let's not speak about it. We sold it to Penguin Books.
Oh, wow.
Then later we heard from Ron Howard's company, Imagine Entertainment.
Oh, wow.
And I had to say to them, is this a joke? Because this is a book about high-stakes thievery. It's a spoof kind of book. And they said, "We know, but we love the title. We want the rights to the title, and we want to use this book as like a roadmap for planning all our different elaborate heists, because we're doing a heist movie."
Yeah.
And I said, "Makes perfect sense."
Nice. Okay. So now you're getting somewhere in terms of the trajectory. So self-publish, and I remember some stats. The average self-publishing book sells about 150 units. That's family and friends typically. And that's somebody who's promoting it. 95% don't sell more than 500. And tell me if this stat's true. I was told for all books ever printed, including like the Bible that sold millions of copies, the average units sold for all books is 2,500.
That's possible.
Does that sound about right?
That could be right. I mean, I don't know how they're getting all their figures.
Yeah, I don't know.
That.
Of course, there's millions, like say Michelle Obama book, and there's a guy who's selling 3. But I guess I got it from somewhere.
It sounds about right to me.
Yeah.
I mean, with self-publishing, you're right. You got to hope that at least your friends, your family, the ones who really care about you, bought the book.
Correct.
And but if you hit it big in self-publishing, like a lot of authors use that as a means to kind of engineer themselves back into traditional publishing.
Yeah.
Some do a hybrid of things. They continue their self-publishing while they do some traditional.
Yeah.
A combination of things. But you got to hit big numbers in that space to do that. I would say most publishers, I think that figure you gave sounds about right, but I think in terms of what publishers would have in mind as a goal for a book of their own that they published, I think they'd be pretty happy with most book that sold anywhere in the range of 10 to 15,000 copies.
Yeah, they'd be very happy, especially nowadays. All right, so now, and again, I have a lot of guests that have stories, and then some of them even have a little bit of an ecosystem. Maybe they have 100,000 followers. They got a YouTube channel. They got maybe an ecosystem of, let's say, 250,000. They have a legitimate story to tell. What should somebody do to prepare to meet with you? Is it a treatment? I don't know the book version. Is it a manuscript? Is it a full book? Is it, should it representation? Walk us through, what should I do before I meet with Mark?
Well, if you're an author of fiction, you need to have written the full manuscript, and it needs to be within a normal word count range. Usually 80 to 120,000 words, but some people say 80 to 90.
And that's about 120 pages-ish?
Well, it's hard to go by page number because it depends on font size and stuff like that. Better to go by word count, but yeah, roughly I think it could be 250 pages or so, depending on the font size.
That's a big book.
Yeah, and then you want to couple that with a query letter. Yeah. It's like a cover letter introducing us to you and your book. And then if you are doing nonfiction, you want a book proposal, which you lay out your vision for how you want the book to look.
Is that the book version of a treatment, essentially?
Kind of, yeah, exactly, yeah. You'd have the delivery date in there, all the things you're planning for the book, and then you just include like 1 or 2 sample chapters.
Yeah.
So that's easy in a sense because if one idea doesn't work, you write 2 new sample chapters and a new idea with a different proposal.
Good point. Now, you, Mark, specifically, if you give a little bit of your secret sauce, do you want person A who has a really large following, maybe like a social media star, maybe a big ecosystem, reality star, that is just, off the rip is going to sell thousands of units, maybe tens of thousands of units, but has an okay story that you can maybe link them up with a ghostwriter? Or do you want a banger, drop dead story, like that's insane, like your hair's in the back of your neck, stand up, but they don't have 2 nickels to rub together and nobody knows who they are? If you had to pick, which would you generally go with?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, most publishers are thinking to themselves, if this guy has 1 million followers and a fraction of that audience buys the book, we're in good shape. That's what's going through a lot of their minds. But more and more, they're looking for engagement and then stories that, are like current events and then could also backlist really well.
What's backlist?
Basically, when a book first publishes, it's called a front list title.
Okay.
And then some years later, while the book is still out there but being sold, we call it a backlist title. That's when it begins to backlist.
Got it.
So they want a book that can continue to sell over the years. When you do a book that's just sort of on, like this is kind of a perennial topic. Yeah. People will always listen to Frank Sinatra's music. Yeah. There's interest in the mob. There's interest in hair.
Yeah, it's evergreen.
Yeah, it's an evergreen. Yeah. Whereas if you do something that's very topical, it's like all the book sales might occur just on a short, thick tail rather than a long, thin tail.
Good point. Okay. So I have a story. I come to you, put a package together, you pitch it. Do you typically on your end, do you like a 360, hey, listen, come to me, I'll get you a book, we'll option the movie rights, clothing, etc.? Or are you more a book guy, I'll flip this book for you and then just kind of move on? Like, how do you typically like do it?
We look at books in terms of every manifestation a book can take. So, and we've done a lot of work in the book to film and TV space. Like we did the House of Gucci, we did the Dune movies, The Gray Man with Ryan Gosling on Netflix.
Oh, wow.
Some movies with Spielberg, a lot of different films and TV shows based on our books. So yeah, when we look at a book, we think, what are all the different revenue tributaries to this book? It could be an audiobook. It could be translated and published overseas into other languages. We've done merch for some clients too.
Yeah.
We try and help authors, monetize their books that way.
So what about if you have a really good story? I heard some people sign into some shopping contracts where they'll like say, hey, here's a few bucks, give me a year or whatever that is and shop that around. Do you like to do that, or is that something you stay away from?
My preference is to either get something optioned or just outright sold, because when you give someone something to just shop around and they don't pay any money to do that,
Yeah.
what'll happen is
No priority.
they don't have skin in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if we do those scenarios, we try to keep it very simple, the arrangement with them.
Yeah.
And we try and give them as little time as possible
Yeah.
to put it together, because they're not putting any money up front.
Yeah.
But yeah, better if something gets optioned, or even better if it just gets outright sold. Yeah.
If you give example, and second one you give if you want, give me one where you were just right. Like you were dying on the hill. I'm getting this out. Maybe it was a title that or opportunity that was kind of looked down on, but you were right about. And if you're allowed to give one, maybe you weren't so right about.
Oh, like one that got away, maybe?
Yeah.
Or, well, there've been a few of those. It inevitably happens. One of the books that got away is this comic book creator called, he goes by the name The Awkward Yeti.
Okay.
And he had this book called The Heart and the Brain. And it was these two organs, they talk with each other, and it teaches you how they kind of function based on their funny interactions.
Interesting.
And I didn't see it right away as a book. You know, he had a popular webtoon following. Andrews McMeel Publishing picked it up. They do, I think they do the Garfield books. They do like, I think Calvin and Hobbes. They do some good ones. They picked it up. It became a New York Times bestseller. That happens sometimes.
Wow.
In one instance, one of those authors, they sold a ton of books, and then came back to me, even though I didn't, do the book deal. I missed it, but they wanted to work with me all along. So sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
But one where I guess I was proven right. There's this author, Alan Ladd.
Okay.
And, he didn't have a whole lot of experience in writing. He owned an executive search firm.
Okay.
And he wrote this book about messenger pigeons during the First World War, how they were, like in Game of Thrones, they used those ravens or whatever. So they were using these messenger pigeons, and there's this kind of like that movie or the book, Love in the Time of Cholera. There's this couple that they fall in love. They're on kind of different parts of the war, and there's this messenger pigeon, and then years later, one of these messages is found on the pigeon in a chimney somewhere.
Interesting.
It was his first book. One publisher bought the book, but it became a USA Today bestseller, and he's on to, his, I think, 6th or 7th book, something like that. So, yeah, he's enjoying it. That's good. I mean, so sometimes that happens.
Sometimes get it right. So, okay, so now, so interesting enough is typically when I do a marketing campaign or PR campaign for a book, it's typically a self-title. But I did do 2 campaigns, and I don't want to call out any of the big houses because just in case if I ever need a book. And what happened was basically both were assigned a PR agent, and they didn't really do much to support the authors. These were like bigger names, full on. One of, I think two of the biggest publishing houses, and I kind of got to know the girl like pretty well. And she kind of opened up a little bit. She's like, listen, like, I know PR really well. I have like 40 clients at launches and they're working on. They don't give us a lot of resources. On top of it.
When you say they, you mean the publisher?
Like the publisher. Like in the past, like there was kind of like the trilogy of like, Howard Stern and like David Letterman and who else was on the East Coast and on the West Coast and maybe Johnny Carson even back in the day.
Yeah.
And then on the West Coast, it was, whoever... other late night show, that whatever it was, right? And now it's different podcasting, but nevertheless, big name, didn't get the support and needed kind of some ancillary press to book stuff for him because they weren't getting the resources from big publishers. And I think it was one of the ones that merged or gonna merge, because I was like, I'm a financial guy, so I'm reading about a possible merger. So I'm thinking they're like tightening up on money to either buy something or get acquired. My point being is, you get your story out there. Mark closes a deal for you. It gets picked up by a publishing house. You get a decent advance, right? And now you're like, hey, let's go. Are you seeing adequate support from publishers in your opinion? And if not, do you recommend maybe people still retain a publicist even though they got picked up?
It really depends. I always say there's a lot of, I don't want to call it black magic, but, you never know what the outcome can be because on the one hand, yeah, the publisher will give you a marketing and publicity person. They'll assign you like a couple people or more from a department to kind of write up marketing and publicity plans for you. But one instance, I had this thing happen where we got the plans in, but it had a different authors and a different book name on it. And
so the template.
5 minutes later, oops, here's the correct one.
Here's your unique program.
Yeah, same thing, same exact thing.
Yeah.
And so you realize, yeah, you're right. It's all cookie cutter, that stuff.
Yeah.
You don't even know if they're going to follow through on it. What we try to do with publishers is to hold them to task and, set a regular marketing and publicity meeting, follow up with them on different items, kind of comment and improve upon these plans in the spirit of success.
Yeah.
And, do what we can to make better plans. Sometimes the authors want to devote a portion of their book advance to hiring, like you say, an outside publicist. And, you never know how that can go. To me, it's sort of like throwing pebbles in a pond. But even then, there are many ripples from a pebble in a pond. There could be things living under the surface of the lake, So, yeah, I've had all kinds of results. But the point is, you never know where something could catch on. So you have to it's a little bit of roulette. You got to place the chips.
So I'll get to the experience in a second. There's a lot of scams, I believe, in the vanity press and the book marketing press. Just a lot of scams. I'll get to that in a second. But from your side, what are some scams to look out for? Like literary agents are not going to, if they ask for money up front or, ask for like 40%. Like what are some of the scams that people that are watching, whether they use you or somebody else, obviously you're not going to scam them, but what I'm getting at is somebody watching who reaches out to a literary agent, what are some pitfalls to avoid?
So, there's a lot of stuff I've heard of, in self-publishing where there are companies that kind of enable authors in their self-publishing and, you could get mixed results. Companies that, basically they have the author pay them to publish the book, which is not really a common thing to do. Usually the publisher pays the author, or I've seen some companies that kind of split the proceeds down the middle with the author, but the author shouldn't be, the author shouldn't be paying to have their book self-published effectively. With agents, our work is commission-based, so it's no different than like a real estate agent. You say, hey, sell my house, sell my apartment. They do it. Then they take a commission for doing it. Our work is entirely commission-based. No one should be charging any money up front to authors to represent their book to publishers. We list our commission structure on our website because, we're very transparent about it. Yeah.
What's your ranges, if you don't mind?
So standard across the industry is 15%. Okay. For deals done in North America for authors. And you're pretty much going to see that at most legitimate literary agencies across the industry.
And you eat off the total, meaning, hey, they get an advance.
Yep.
But I'm assuming there's a total package. You eat off the total.
Advance and royalties, we commission it at 15%, and we pay on the remaining 85% of monies to the author.
Oh, wow. And then just, your experience, last 10 successful titles, hey, 30% came from advance and the rest came from royalties, or was it more back end or a little money in advance, but they ate off the royalties for a while?
We're finding that about a third of income overall is coming from advances, a third from royalties, and a third from
other, right?
Yeah, kind of like licenses, like doing an audiobook license, doing foreign licenses, film and TV.
You negotiate like other stuff other than that. So you do audio. What about if now again, if I you pick up my book, but you I'm assuming if there's an option later, you typically get to eat off that as well, correct?
If we option or sell a book for film and TV, then we would commission it.
Nice. All right. So I self-published my book, and I was at the time doing a lot better financially, so I had the scratch, and I got approached, and it's interesting because I checked out your site, and they did business like Deepak Chopra as I thought a reputable company out of Canada, and they promised me to get in the New York Times bestseller list. Right,
that's a big promise.
Which is crazy, and I thought it was smart, and the way it was explained to me is give us $20,000, we'll take I don't know like X amount of it towards buying books strategically because we know the 11 places and we got to sell X amount of units. We're going to send it out to 1 million people on social. You have your people coordinated by. I know, Marcus. It's really embarrassing, but there's a silver lining. Mm-hmm. So I did it. It failed completely. Now, at this point, I'm like, do I fly to Canada and like hurt this person? I'm like, you know what? Here's the option. She offered to give X amount back. I'm like, you know what? It's not really about the money per se. I just need it to whatever. So we did another campaign, and it moved the needle a little bit. And again, we were supposed to either make the USA Today, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Nothing. So luckily, I had a good year that year. So I'm like, you know what? Let me just write it off. So I took the loss off that year. And what I did was I reverse engineer how she did it. Right? So since then, I don't promote this on my website. I don't even talk about this a lot because I kind of call it a whisper promotion because I know it's gray area. I'll get to that in a second. I've probably done about $100,000 in bestseller promotions for self-published and even published authors. So I made my money back. So that so I rather than like go to jail,
hey, everything
get the write-off, reverse engineer it, learn it, and do it. So interesting enough is though, when I deal with people who are published and they want a bestseller campaign, what the publishers don't like it.
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
Because I've heard of, so for instance, James Patterson.
Yeah.
Okay. Huge New York Times bestselling
Absolutely.
author. Every single one of his books is, right?
Yeah.
He's a machine.
He gamed the system in the beginning?
He gamed the system. What he was doing was, I don't know if it was in the beginning, but at a certain point, he was buying pallets of his own books, storing them in a warehouse somewhere.
Smart.
The New York Times, they found out about it. They banned him from the New York Times bestsellers list. Now, how is he still making it onto the New York Times bestsellers list? If you notice, he's always doing that with a co-author. Yeah. Be it Dolly Parton or he's writing books with the Clintons or whoever. So he's kind of, they're rising up on that cloud together. And technically, it's not really James making the New York Times list. It's the co-author. So he even works with really young co-authors. He'll be like, here's the outline, go write the story.
But you don't know about the scam because you really think about it. Oh, wow, James Patterson's like, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, well, it could... the highest levels, right? So he was working with a company that helped him, I guess, do that. He's probably since stopped doing that. Any of these companies that people work with, you got to make sure that they're doing this through normal channels.
In an honest way.
Yeah, and that they're.
Well, I never did a New York Times campaign. What we do is I don't give too much of secret sauce away, but what we do is we'll create like a landing page. We'll do a promotion, friends and family. And people can buy the book in advance copy.
Yeah.
And then also do some promotion the week of. So between the pre-buy and the buy, we coordinate through like VPNs and stuff to get it. And like, I don't want to sit there ship out books, so I'll just do it through Amazon day of. So by coordinating the buy for the author, and it's crazy. So this is hardcover. If you sold, let's say the day of launch on Amazon, if they sold 800 of these in one day, which is not that crazy of a number, it'd be number one worldwide on hardcover. If they sold 500, it'd be number one on softcover worldwide. Now, you could argue, it's a little gray, you're coordinated by. However, what happens is with Amazon, there's an algorithm and it trips the algorithm and then promotes it on your behalf. So we generally see a 20% increase above the coordinated buy, and typically that's when you hit. But you got to do it within the first 30 days to get the new bestseller kind of logo, if you will. Otherwise, it doesn't work. But so I got pushback from publishers when they found out about it. I was working with somebody. I'm like, listen, we're just doing a coordinated buy.
You're doing it by the system.
Correct.
And... yeah, I've heard of that. For instance, if it gets over, I forget what it is, 50 reviews or something, then like another algorithm picks it up.
Correct.
But yeah, all those...
and the reviews have to be verified. Yeah. That's where the specialty comes in, because one, you need VPNs that rotate, because if you do from the same VPN, Amazon picks up on it and it won't count it. The second is they need to do real reviews. And where it gets crazy is, so super early when I would do a campaign, somebody, I swear Mark's going to buy and Jack's going to buy and Tom's going to buy. And like these are my people. Like I'll go, they're buying, they don't buy. So get them to pre-order the book on the landing page to get the revenue to come in.
Yep.
And then we've done coordinated buy. So I'm sorry, guys. It's a reality of it.
Some of the sauce.
It's just a reality of it. All right. So let's talk about AI. So a good friend of mine, Kevin Interdonato, was on. He's an actor, does movies. He self makes movies, then goes to big distribution. But kind of, I still think the movie space is going to get disrupted as well. I think eventually with different platforms, if you got a few bucks to make a movie, I think it's going to cut out distribution. And I discussed that with Kevin. So him and I were chatting, and in real time, I said I want to write up a treatment, like a 20-page treatment, so it wasn't a short one, but in-depth manuscript of a mob movie based off of X, Y, and Z. I think I was using ChatGPT at the time, and it put out a pretty good script in about 1.8 seconds, right? So now, we're both smart guys. Well, you're smarter than me, but we're both smart guys. What's stopping the big publishers is saying, hey, we're going to create Mark the AI avatar, and that avatar is going to write all of our books for us, and we're going to cut out Mark Gottlieb and all the authors, and we're going to own all the IPs.
Anything is possible. I mean, I think the creative fields are particularly susceptible to AI. I mean, now they're saying AI could replace doctors and lawyers too with what they do. The government may have to put some guardrails on, or people will have to find a way, but in publishing, I think, the Authors Guild is sort of, they're not anti-AI.
Yeah.
They
should be.
They are, to the extent that they want authors to be, one, fairly compensated for their work.
Of course. It's IP.
Two, like wherever their work is used, they need to get credit.
Yeah.
And three, their work can't be like abused or misused.
But here's
my
my point, though. I'm talking about you and I are the axis of evils for big publishers.
How would they go about it?
And we're going to go ahead and we're going to create fake avatars that are owned by us, and we're just going to chat. I can have a book written in under 3 minutes, and it's not going to be bad.
Well, let's put it this way. Publishers have kind of done stuff like that in the past.
It didn't work out so.
It either did or didn't, but not precisely that. They've packaged books. So I'll give you an example. Yeah. A lot of children's picture books are written by editors inside of publishing houses.
Stop it.
And then they go out and they hire artists to illustrate them.
The person's like on salary?
And they're on salary. So they're not, maybe they get a nice bonus that year. Maybe they get a raise.
Pizza on Friday.
Yeah, pizza on Friday. But they're not really going to participate in the same way for the most part. So there's a lot of that goes on, packaging, things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if publishers started to do that. But there's been some resistance from publishers and authors. It was announced in the news the other day, just the other day. I've known for much longer.
Yeah.
But HarperCollins is working with Microsoft to license out their nonfiction book titles for AI in order to train the AI bot that Microsoft has.
Yeah.
And it's not a great deal. I mean, they're paying $2,500 to the author, $2,500 to the publisher. It's a 3-year license. They say the rights come back, but once you feed it into the system for training, that's it. It's gone.
And it's going to know enough to rewrite it enough for you not to sue the pants off them.
Right. Well, they let you, if you do find that the work is misused in some way, you can sue. They baked that into the deal.
Yeah, good luck on some Microsoft attorneys.
It's hard. It's probably hard to prove. They say they won't quote.
That's it?
Yeah.
For a title? $5,000?
It's not a whole lot, and for all the use they get out of it. And then once they have the book, what do they ever need it again for?
Well, the real reason, except for tax write-off, so you can catch his options, but the real reason Elon Musk bought Twitter was to get the database of language learning. So now you aggregate that, and you have all real-time language learning, and now he's going to put it in his robots, and it's going to be a person. It's going to be an actual, or a driver, or whatever that is. So what is an NLP? So now I want to go along the chain. Now you're an ethical guy, right? You have good taste in bourbon. But you may be a jerk and just say, hey, I have a client, the client X, and you might have ChatGPT'd the whole book yourself, but you have a fictitious LLC that you own. So you could theoretically pitch up titles. I'm just theoretically of fictitious authors by using it and cutting out your clients. I'm not saying you would do that, but could that happen?
Look, anything is possible, but I think for us, we have a symbiotic relationship with authors because we represent authors to publishers, and that's sort of the quickest way to get fired by every client. But the same time, the technology, it's sort of like, you remember like Pong and like Pac-Man and that stuff. Like in the early days of video games, Tetris, like what the technology is nowhere near where it is now. We're still in the earliest days of AI where there's still some imperfections in it. You can tell it's not quite human. If anything, some people say AI places a lot of extra value on the human aspect of things. But I don't think that's going to stop publishers. I don't think it'll stop authors or anyone from...
Okay, now as a literary agent, okay, to defend your position. Are you a lawyer by training?
No.
Okay. So you have a business background, obviously. You negotiate the terms fairly reasonably.
I've studied publishing, you know.
So did you ever have, or do you think it can happen where, you know what, I'm not going to use Mark. I'm going to deal with Penguin directly or whoever. And when they respond to me, I'm just going to throw in the ChatGPT to give them a response and help negotiate the contract. Do you fear that at all? Or because real quick, I have my lawyer on retainer. He's a friend at this point. He's a great guy. He doesn't overbill me. If I call him, he doesn't charge for phone calls. Only charges me for work that he does. So I'm very lucky in that sense. But have responded using ChatGPT to try to exhaust before going to him.
Sure.
And it worked a few times.
Oh, I hope he's not listening.
Dominic, sorry, Dom.
You're going to have to share some of that bourbon with him.
You ain't kidding.
But no, I mean, first of all, publishers actually don't accept unsolicited submissions.
Good point.
Unless they come by way of an agent. They like to work with agents and agencies because they know we're sort of this on-ramp to the superhighway of publishing, in that an author who could be, you know, wet behind the ears or something, you know, an agent can help smooth out the process with the publisher and sort of, you know, bless you, all that. The other part of it is anyone can ask a publisher for anything. Even a lawyer can.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the publisher's going to do that. Whereas where I work, you know, our agency, we actually lead the publishing industry in number of deals and amount of money for deals consecutively.
Oh, wow.
It's going as far back as the year 2000. It's been that way. So when we go to publishers and we ask for something, it's not one person asking. It's the entire agency, all the authors, and the fact that the publisher's business depends on us. So it's easier.
They need to feed the demon.
Yeah. So we you're right. Or, you know, in Sinatra's world, in the mob world, you know, we could break fingers if we don't get you know, what the author wants. So, yeah, it's anyway.
And what? So, what's your wheelhouse? Because I know for a fact people are gonna reach out to me. Hey, I want to give Mark's email number, etc. We'll put your public contact information. We don't want to respond to him privately. Be respectful, but if we have any reach out, we'll show you how to find Mark socially on his appropriate external socials or email, whatever. But my point being is, what's your wheelhouse? Like I noticed, like in the past, I've done a lot of like mob and organized crime interviews, and I noticed like St. Martin's Press was like heavy on that. I noticed certain like publishing houses have their wheelhouse. You as a literary agent, what has been historically your wheelhouse in which genre?
Well, usually for our agency, fiction is really our bread and butter.
Fiction is okay.
It sells in bigger numbers typically than nonfiction, depending on the nonfiction book idea. But we do a whole range of celebrity nonfiction. Like we've worked with Dick Van Dyke and Colbert and Jon Stewart, Paris Hilton, you name it.
Nice.
And then, you know, we've done serious fiction too, like this guy Michael Ondaatje who wrote The English Patient.
Okay,
this guy Marlon James. There are a lot of, you know, big name literary authors there too, and children's authors. So we're open for business. We're open to all kinds of ideas and books.
Now you get a sit down with you, like mob parlance, right? You say, you know what, let's do it. You send them a contract. You pitch it, right? X, Y, and Z. How much time do you give it? Like, do you set the expectation? Say, listen, like I have these relationships. I have these meetings. You know, because you're commissional, you got to eat too, right? Do you give it like 90 days, 120 days? Is it just open-ended? How much time do you give it before you call them up and say, listen, you know what, we exhausted all avenues. You know, maybe you might want to go a different direction.
Well, I could tell you what the average is and also give you both the extremes.
Yeah.
On average, I think it's good to give it a few months. Publishing, it's a slow-moving business. It takes people time to read and consider and share with their colleagues. The fastest I ever heard was like sitting like this, just telling someone about a book and then them writing something on a piece of paper, passing the offer, you know, like that's happened. Especially if the person owns the company, you know, they can do that. They can make those decisions. The longest it took, 9 months went by. It seemed like all hope was lost, and then an offer came out of the woodwork. That was actually with that book. We ended up optioning that to I think it was HBO.
Oh wow!
So and the author, he was very happy, but sometimes it can take a while. Yeah.
So I always kind of say, in any business dealing or interacting with people, you have somewhat of a center, right? And what I mean by that is, let's just say somebody comes to you and there's a good author and then there's a good script and it doesn't get picked up. Are you more of a relationship guy? Hey, that didn't get picked up. That was not the greatest one. Give me more. Or are you more of a script guy where, hey, your script isn't great, it didn't get picked up, don't come back? What's your center, if that makes are you the horse or a jockey guy, if that makes sense?
I usually look at authors not in terms of book deals, but in terms of careers.
Yeah, good point.
I've had a few instances with clients where maybe the first book or two didn't sell, but the third one did. In one instance, that book was a 6-figure deal. Was Deal of the Week in Publishers Weekly magazine. Scribner, who's Stephen King's publisher, picked it up.
Yeah.
And then Emma Roberts. Yeah, they're a great publisher. I mean, but with that author, the first 2 books, didn't sell. It was the third book.
Interesting.
But that counted for everything,
So are you, because you're a younger guy and you're good at what you do, are you let me watch trends, see social, maybe tap on the shoulder, hey, anybody representing you, let's do business? Or are you more, hey, let me hang out and see what comes in?
It's a combination of things. So I'm always reading the query letters that come in. I do that daily just to stay on top of them. Yeah. And I do my own reading. It's not because I don't trust other people.
You don't use AI for that?
No. I gotta do it. At the end of the day, you have to. But then sometimes there are projects I seek out. Like I hear about something and then I chase that project. A perfectly good example that may even want to have him on the show. He lives not too far from here. This guy, Tom Tursich. I found out about him because he was on the #1 spot on Reddit.
Interesting.
What he did was he was a young guy. He was in college or something. I think either a family member or a friend of his passed away. He was so devastated. He just started walking his dog to get some fresh air. And then, like in Forrest Gump, he just didn't stop walking. He just kept going. He went to the store, bought camping gear, and he decided to walk around the entire earth on foot.
The hell?
Yeah, with his dog. So now there are other people who walked around planet Earth. Yeah. He's the third to have done so, but the first with a dog.
What the heck?
Yeah. So
what do you mean? Like Africa?
Everywhere, all on foot. Photos, maps, he documented it, the whole thing. We sold the book to a publisher.
That's crazy.
Now he's on the speaking circuit. Yeah.
That's dope. So I noticed TMG also does some marketing as well. So would you market for somebody that you didn't represent in a book deal, or the opposite? You'll give ancillary support to people that you sign? What's your model?
Really, our services are set up to service the needs of the clients of the agency.
Got it.
So, we can't kind of help authors with only one aspect of their publishing. It's hard to do that. It's
control the narrative, the marketing, the messaging, social.
We want to give everyone we don't want to be spread too thin, So, just
Makes
to give
sense.
the right
If you don't mind
attention.
me asking, and you can share this or not, is I get a deal with you. You secure me X amount, I get my percent, you get your percent, and we identify that we need marketing support for the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, do you negotiate with the publisher, hey, we need a few extra bucks for marketing, or does it come out of the author's end, or it depends? How does that work?
A lot of publishers are reticent to put that in the publishing contract because then it becomes a material term of the publishing agreement, and the publisher doesn't want to be in breach of their own publishing agreement. Sometimes what I've seen with publishers is they're willing to kind of softly float some plans our way by email, or they might say what kind of budget they could devote to it, marketing-wise.
And they spend it, or you spend it typically?
The publisher really spends it.
The author give you some idea of what they're doing.
The author has the advance. They can put that toward anything they want, really. Some will reinvest by getting an outside publicist or things like that. But we try and get the publishers to do the best they can with those plans. Yeah.
So what are some crazy deal points along the way where obviously it's about getting the best financial deal, but with any weird negotiations on behalf of the author or even the publisher, we're like, hey, I had to get my dog in advance, or just like any like crazy stuff or any deal points that, or maybe, for example, hey, if you're in your shoes and you have a book, any deal points to look out for? Just want to hear for some oddities that pop up.
Well, the oddest thing that ever happened to me along deal making was I have this author, Christopher Brown. He has a book out now called A Natural History of Empty Lots, and he, at this time, it was his debut novel, Tropic of Kansas. It's like literary science fiction. There was a lot of heat around the book because it was in 2016 when we were submitting this book. It's about a telegenic businessman of a dictator who becomes president of the United States. He tells us we need to build walls between us and Canada and Mexico. We build the walls, but then the next thing we know, we're being policed by aerial drones. So then who shows up on the campaign trail in 2017? Publishers are like, how could you have predicted this? And the guy's like, I'm a science fiction author. I just try to imagine the scary future. But anyway, we had a bunch of offers for this book. We went with one publisher. The publisher who made us the offer, it was for less money, but we felt there was no shame in taking an offer for less money, even though we had higher offers, because it was Tor Forge books. They're like the pinnacle of science fiction publishing. And the editor who bought the book, this guy David Hartwell, was Philip K. Dick's editor. Android, Stream of Electric Sheep, Blade Runner, all that. So we figured it would be great to have him working with this book, basically. And what happened was, in the strangest turn of events, like a day later, we found out he was going through a bad divorce. He was at his house upstate. Guy his age, I think he was in his 70s. He should not have been carrying a bookcase down some stairs. He fell. He had a severe brain hemorrhage and died. Nice. Well, he didn't die right away. He was in the hospital. And there was, I guess, either a do not resuscitate order or something, but his soon-to-be ex-wife took him off life support.
Nice.
And so then we get an email from the owner of the company. He's not the owner anymore, but Tom Doherty, saying, you know what? We didn't actually want to buy the book. It's just this guy, David Hartwell, believed in it, and we've been proven wrong by him in the past, and he's such a legendary editor, but with him gone, you should just, the body hadn't even gone cold yet.
Wow.
His obituary was in the New York Times on the front page, but he said, you should take the project somewhere else. Now, we could hold the gun to the publisher's head and say, hey, we got a deal, it's in writing, but the book would be a success, and they would only take credit for it. It would not be because of anything they did.
Wow.
So we quietly went to the other publisher. Oddly enough, the other editor's name was also David. The story just keeps getting a little bit weirder. And we said, hey, would you reinstate your offer? And he did. Yeah. And the book lived there happily ever after. The author's done a bunch of books since then. So anything can happen during a deal.
So we're kind of near the tail end. So I've really learned a lot from you. We'd love to have you back, especially when you launch your next new book. Or maybe have one of the authors in. We could
absolutely
have a round table. But so I kind of get the when I should self-publish if I don't have a platform. If I have a platform, seek a literary agent. That part makes sense. You get a cut for what you're doing, so you're incentivized to moving the needle. It might be a 360 kind of deal. That part, that part I get. Do you, for example, ever tie somebody up in a sense where, hey, you know what, I'll take your book, I'll pitch it, but I need the next 3 books, or is it typically a deal by deal type thing?
Usually with most nonfiction projects, like if it's a memoir, there isn't going to be a sequel to the memoir. So
So
we'll do that, just one project basically.
What advice do you have somebody where I like kind of toy with talent management. And management. I didn't do it because I don't know. I just never got not to it. But I had somebody come to me who was like kind of in that mob life, and they were relative to somebody really big. And they got approached by a publishing house and had a literary agent and everything else. And what happened was he kind of wanted like the 360 like life rights.
Oh, no.
And I said, no. I said, the little I know, just make it a period piece from X, Y, and Z, or X to Y. And that's what they did. They got really good money from it, but protect the other. Can you kind of give a little bit to our audience what that means and what to look out for, what not to give up, and what to.
Well, there's usually just two types of agreements, agency agreements. Either the first one I mentioned, which is like a single work term representation agreement. It's like, okay, we're going to represent this one book over this period of time.
Perfect.
And then there's what's called an all works term representation agreement, which tends to apply to authors of fiction because they're prolific. They're writing many books.
Imaginations, and it's theoretically infinite for as long as they live.
Yeah, and so that's usually, okay, we'll represent your body of work over whatever period of time. We've done either agreement, whatever the client wants. We try and keep it simple, the term's short. It renews, but it's up to the client really if they want to renew. And we want people to feel like they want to work with us, not that they have to. And so we try to make it easy. Like, you don't think about the fine print when you sign up for your cable bill, like, I'm not saying it's like that, but we try to keep it easy.
So, okay, because I literally get called a lot, asked a lot. When should I call you and when shouldn't I?
Well, I think if you're an author of fiction, if you have not finished the manuscript, it's not the right time. Yeah,
I'm more of a nonfiction guy.
If you're a nonfiction guy, you need to have done the book proposal, the sample chapters, put a query letter together, and ideally you have a platform, or at least you've kind of conceived of one, or have a way of building one.
So include your socials.
Yep.
And do you want so typically, and again, because of the nature of the podcast, a lot where criminals have an interesting life. Do you recommend them hiring maybe an editor, ghostwriter to help with that, or you just want it raw and you could always clean it up later? Where do you land on that?
Well, I think a lot of people will want to have, if they've got the writing chops, by all means they should do it. Yeah. But if they know they don't, then ideally they don't have to have that going in. We can always find them a potential co-writer or ghostwriter and help make them a collaboration agreement. But yeah, I think they got to be honest with themselves.
All right. You don't have to name names on this one because you're still in business and you're a young guy. Without giving it away, if they're watching, give us the worst idea proposal that just I'm talking the worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst, which was also the best of the best. And I just didn't. It usually is. That's what happens. Sometimes it's so bad, it just sort of implodes on itself and then becomes amazing. It was vampire tanks. And it's exactly what it sounds like. They're tanks that are also blood-sucking vampires. And if you get bit by one, you turn into a vampire tank. And I thought, this is so frickin' cool. I'm very tempted. I didn't do it in the end. I still look over my shoulder and think about vampire tanks, if I should have or not. That could be a good graphic novel, I think. That'd look cool as a graphic novel.
I was going to say. All right. So give us a little bit about other stuff that you guys do at TMG. Because, you came graciously from New York. A little bit about that. And then more importantly, how can people find you?
Sure.
And, appropriately, because they're going to bug me. Oh, call Mark for me. No, he's going to give his appropriate information. You're welcome to reach out as well. And if you do reach out to me, I'm going to take 15% of additional than what he takes. Just kidding. But all seriousness, give us a little bit more what TMG does.
Yeah.
And a little bit about how to find it.
Sure. So the quick spiel on the agency is, like I mentioned before, our agency, we represent many, #1 New York Times bestselling authors, major award-winning authors. We typically lead the industry in number of deals, amount of money for deals for decades. And, we represent authors to book publishers and help authors with every manifestation a book can take. It's a full-service agency.
End to end.
Yeah, the whole thing. And yeah, we are based in New York City, where publishing is really kind of centralized. And if they want to reach us, I'd say they should go to our website, tridentmediagroup.com. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. Mark, thanks so much.
This is good. Thank you.
All right. See you next time.